Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto skidded to a halt, as he heard a voice seemingly whispering in his mind. His feet dug into the ground and kicked up a large cloud of dust, causing Nell to cough, as he looked to the left and right. Naru-kun, cough, why did we cough, stop? He looked around rapidly, as the dust began to clear. Something was present, but he could not see it, only sense it. Do you feel that? Naruto internally asked his tenant. I feel nothing, you must be paranoid, Kit. Perhaps we should find an inn, so you can rest yourself fully. Naruto shook his head, drawing a confused look from Nell as he did so, while silently declaring. I don't need sleep. I'm wide awake, and someone or something is present with us. I sense no one. Naruto was beginning to grow frustrated, as he could not find this strange presence that seemed to be observing him, and that he alone was aware of. Well, I do. Now shut up so I can concentrate on finding it. The demon lord snorted in contempt before he grumbled his agreement. Very well, I shall be silent for now. Free of any more voices in his head, the rogue nin closed his eyes and stood stone still for a moment. As Naruto concentrated, his adoptive daughter's voice began to fade into the background, as he looked about for anything out of the ordinary, not with his eyes or ears, but with his spirit. Naruto felt something, but it was a ways off and not moving. Was it a threat? He could not be sure. But someone or something was there. Who goes there? The blonde Jinchuriki shouted in his mind. Unfortunately, the only answer he received was nothing. This was growing tiresome, and with a sigh, Naruto reverted himself back into normal vision and opened his eyes to find Nell still perched on his shoulder, peering down at him, her hazel-colored eyes filled with both curiosity and concern. Naru-kun, are you okay? Naruto gave a rueful smile, as he reached up to ruffle Nell's green hair, causing her to giggle. I'm fine, Nell too, I was just looking for someone. The little Arankar frowned at Naruto's forlorn look before leaning over and giving him a small kiss on the forehead like any good daughter would do, and asked. Is Naru-kun lonely? Does he need a wife-chan? Naruto nearly stumbled to the ground and blushed at his surrogate daughter's question, as he exclaimed with exasperation. Nell too, I can't just grab a wife-chan out of the blue. Why not? Was little Nell's inquisitive response. Naruto grumbled under his breath, as a tick mark appeared on his head. Already annoyed by not being able to locate that mysterious presence he felt, Naruto accidentally shouted at Nell in a fierce snarl of a voice, as he reached for his mask. Because that's not the way things work. Nell sniffled and tears began to form in her eyes, causing his hand to halt. Nell didn't mean to make Naru-kun angry. He mentally smacked himself across the face. You stupid baka. Stupid. 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 Now look what you did. Desperate not to make her cry, Naruto did the only thing he could possibly think of, as it looked like the invisible dam that held her tears back was about to burst wide open any moment now. So he changed the mood by reaching up to grab her, and in an instant he had gotten her under the arms, causing her sniffles to stop, as she wondered what he was about to do. Naruto gave Nell a wicked grin. As he did so, she stuck out her tongue in response, setting the stage for what he had planned. Come here, you. Naruto cackled, and then he was mercilessly tickling her, causing the little Arankar to squeal with laughter, as she howled with merriment. Naru-kun. That tickles. Exactly. BW ha ha ha. After 2 minutes of the torture, Naruto decided that Nell had enough and stopped his tickle attack, leaving her laughter to slowly fade away, as she gasped for air. Taking a moment to catch his own breath, he wondered what it was that had brought this all about in the first place. Then it hit him, like a boot to the face from Rock Lee. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he got a flashback, or to be more precise, flashbacks. Blurred images and memories, as they roared through his head at warp speed. Memory flashback number 1. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, I can no longer be with you. What are you talking about, Hinata-chan? My father has put me into an arranged marriage. I will be getting married next week. Ma, married? What do you mean? With who? Hinata finally forced herself to gaze up and see the look of pain etched on Naruto's face. She reached up to touch his cheek and with tears in her eyes softly said, "With Kiba-san. Kiba. But you don't love Kiba, you love me." It doesn't matter who I love, Naruto-kun. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Of course it matters. And no, it doesn't, because next week I will be getting married to Kiba and nothing can change that. Of course we can change that, Hinata-chan. We'll go to Ba-chan Tsunade for help or we can just run away together. But you don't have to get married to Kiba, especially when you don't love him. You don't have to do this, you love me and I love you. Naruto looked down and saw the pained sadness on Hinata's face, before leapt into his arms and he had held her so tight, afraid to let her go, as she wept into his chest and in a choked voice said, I'm sorry, but Lady Tsunade can't do anything and I have to marry Kiba, I have no choice. You do have a choice. Why don't you stand up to father and tell him no? Because I can't. Why? Naruto shouted in frustration with tears rolling down his cheeks, before pushing Hinata away from him. I'm sorry, Naru-kun, I can't tell you why. I want to say no to this marriage, but I can't refuse my father on this matter. You mean you won't refuse your father as always? Naruto spat with disgust. Please believe me, Naru-kun, I do love you with all of my heart and soul. Hinata exclaimed in desperation. Yeah, you love me, but just not enough to refuse your father or your clan of getting married to someone else. Goodbye, Hina-chan, I hope you will have a happy life. Naruto bitterly declared before he turned around and walked away, leaving Hinata weeping uncontrollably on the ground. End of flashback number 1. Naruto remembered the feelings of grief that had overwhelmed him, the pain, the loss, so much to bear, too much to remember, as he saw other images flash through his head. Memory flashback number 2. I love you, Ino-chan. I'm sorry I wasn't able to say those words to you 6 months ago when you uttered them to me. I was too scared and wrapped up in the pain of what had happened with Hinata. But you asked me to give you a chance and I'm so glad I did. Being with you has saved me from the pain and despair I thought would never go away. I know this seems sudden, but you were right, Ino-chan, you are the one that I can love. And I do love you, Ino-chan. Naruto then leaned over and gently placed his soft lips against hers. This was difficult for Ino to resist. She liked how his lips felt when it touched hers, the way it lit a fire in her soul. But she couldn't do this. She couldn't, no matter how much she enjoyed it. Naruto. Ino coughed out in a choked voice while breaking off the kiss. I'm not in love with you anymore. She cried out, tears running down her face. Naruto stood rigid and motionless looking at her, the hurt evident in his voice as he found the words. What do you mean you don't love me anymore? You told me you loved me. Did I do something, Ino-chan? Please tell me what it is and I can fix it. You didn't do anything, Naruto-kun. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, Naruto-kun, I still love you as a friend, but it can never be more than that. Why, Ino-chan? Please tell me why. I'm in love with someone else. Ino exclaimed, more in an attempt to convince herself rather than the now broken boy standing before her. At that moment Shikamaru stepped out from the shadows of the trees and sheepishly walked over to stand next to the weeping Kunoichi. Naruto glanced back and forth between his friend who couldn't look him in the eye and his now blonde ex-girlfriend before reaching down and placing her hand into the Nara boy's hand. Ino was taken aback when Naruto did this and she looked up and gasped in shock at the visage Naruto now bore upon his face. Ino gazed at Naruto and noticed a brief flicker of pain flash through his eyes, before he dropped the engagement ring onto the ground and was walking away into the night in silence. End of flashback. Then another image flashed across his mind, one of Sakura rushing past him towards Sasuke to attend to his injuries when he had brought the Uchiha back and fulfilled his promise to the girl. What pathetic bullshit. A voice rang out inside his head, but not that of the Kyuubi. This voice was dripping with venom and disdain, as Naruto suddenly found himself standing on a white plain. All around him were images of his time with Sakura, Hinata, and Ino flying everywhere, as if he were caught in the middle of this storm of his past. Who are you? Naruto asked, as more images of his past roared through his head. In response, a dark silhouette appeared indistinguishable at the moment, but with a dark, ominous, and deadly aura to it. I never thought sifting through your head would be such a chore. You really are an idiot at times, as your women did a number on you. Naruto frowned as he clenched his hands into fists, all the while receiving images, all of them mistakes that he had made in his past. Whatever you are, why are you making me relive this? An image of him letting Ino go and putting Shikamaru's hand in hers, while walking away without a word. Screaming his fury at Sakura, before he finally snapped and went rogue. Standing outside of the temple at Hinata's wedding, unable to object or stop the proceedings, but wanting so very badly to do so. Catching a fleeting glimpse through the window of Hinata and she of him and how her pale eyes had looked deep into his, the sadness evident within them before she turned her gaze away from his. Grief overcame Naruto, as he placed his hands over his ears, while the voice droned on in his head. I truly am disappointed. The figure then began to take shape and Naruto nearly fell backward in shock, as it was revealed to be that of Momouchi Zabuza himself. But something was different about him. Gone was his usual outfit and harsh attitude. Now, he just seemed disappointed and sad, while as for his outfit it consisted of what appeared to be a black kimono. Are you the one who's been talking to me? Zabuza snorted, and the sneer could be seen through the wrappings he wore over the lower half of his face. Oh look, we have a winner. Why are you doing this to me? Naruto pleadingly asked. Zabuza pointed his free hand at him, one finger jabbing the rogue nin in the chest. I let you take this weapon for your own because I remembered your will of fire from years ago when you battled me in Haku. I thought you would prove to a better master of it than I ever was. But if these little memories of your women playing you for the fool are too much for you to handle, then perhaps I may have overestimated you. Naruto's head snapped up, revealing him glaring furiously at the dead nin, and Zabuza could feel the massive killer intent directed towards him. The blonde Jinchuriki's voice was laced with hate, sadness, determination, and so much more. I may have made some mistakes with the women I've chosen to love, some really stupid mistakes, but I've put that behind me. Right now, I have a friend who needs my help and I won't be done in by some old rotting corpse of a ninja. The next words of the infamous demon of the mist threw Naruto off balance despite his iron determination. I'm not an old rotting corpse of a ninja, I'm the soul or spirit of that ninja. I only exist within the confines of my Zanpakuto, which you now wield. Because you now hold my blade, I'm able to link up with your mind alone. That's why your furry tenant and no one else in the living world can sense me. Then what do you want of me? What I want is to see my blade reach its full potential in power, and I think you might have what it takes to unlock that true capabilities of my blade. You certainly show more promise in doing that than I ever did when I was alive. A second later, the blade appeared in the hand of Naruto, who spun it about and sheathed it into the strap on his back. Why did you contact me like this, and why the torture session of those memories? Because I can only contact you once before I fade away to another plane of existence. As for the memories you suffered, I needed to know if you would be mentally and emotionally strong enough to handle what is to come. To be honest, I'm still not fully convinced that you are, but I have little choice now. Take this. Zabuza handed him a piece of parchment, the tan paper old and worn with age, and yet somehow, it still miraculously held itself together. Gently unfolding the parchment, Naruto saw it was a series of land markings and paths written out on it. It was a map. Confused, he looked up at Zabuza, who began to fade away, as if beckoned by some unseen cue. Oi, what's with the map? Listen well. Follow that map. It will lead you to an old hideaway of mine. When last I checked, it was still in pretty decent condition. You will meet a man there. Show him that blade and he will let you pass. From there on you will start your journey to unlock the power of your Zanpakuto. A power you will need for your upcoming battles if you wish to save your friend. Zabuza was still fading away, as was the white plane upon which the two of them had stood. He was nearly gone now and he wasn't saying anything else. Futilely, Naruto reached out for him, but his hand passed right through the apparition, as he called out to the fading nin. Hey, I've still got some questions for you. However, Zabuza's spirit had disappeared and his voice echoed after his now out-of-sight body. Those are not for me to answer, farewell. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he sucked in a ragged breath. Nell was still talking and Naruto realized that what had seemed like minutes in speaking with Zabuza's spirit had only been a few seconds in real time. Naruto also felt something and looking down he saw it was the map that Zabuza had given him in his hand. As the blonde missing nin stared at the piece of paper in his hand, Nell stopped talking when her intensely curious gaze now locked on the scratched headband he wore about his neck. Ooh, what that? Naruto blinked, as he felt a tug on the headband and felt the fabric slip past his neck as it came loose, but he paid no heed to it, as he was still trying to comprehend what had just happened. Only a few seconds passed here, yet it felt like I spent 10 minutes, in whatever that place was. Nell was oblivious to her adoptive father's musings and was fixated on the shiny metal Hittite she held, as she ran her hands over it lovingly like it was a new toy. Wow, teeth is really pretty, can I keep it, Naru-kun? Hearing Nell's question brought Naruto out of his contemplation and staring down at her he soon recovered himself. Smiling as she stared hopefully up at him, Naruto knelt down and placed her back on his shoulder and said, You want to wear my headband? Nell nodded eagerly as she hung it down in front of his face. The little Arankar answered before her face fell, as she realized something. But I don't know how to tie a knot. Naruto gave a small sigh, as he took the headband from her. Hold still. 1 minute later, Nell bore a sparkling smile upon her face, as her new scratched headband was shining brightly from around her throat just as Naruto had worn it. As Naruto ran down the road following the map that he had been given, his surrogate daughter squealed in delight. This is the best, thanks Naru-kun. You're welcome, Naruto mumbled, as he took a left at a nearby river running alongside the fast-moving water. Where did we get the map? Was yet another inquisitively curious query from Nell. From a friend of mine. When are we going to get breakfast? Soon. How long? Oh boy, this is gonna be a long day. Naruto silently thought, as he rolled his eyes. As he ran into the morning light, he grinned with amusement, as his adopted daughter Nell giggled with laughter from the speed he was running and chided him on. Faster, Naru-kun. Faster. Naruto chuckled before some of the Kyuubi no Yuko's red chakra misted about him, lending him more power and speed. Hold on, Nell-chan, this could get a bit rough. The little green-haired Arankar gripped his shoulders tightly, once more her eyes filled with eager excitement and anticipation, as the light glistened off her headband. Yaay, let's go. Then, as if it was even possible, Naruto kicked his speed up yet another notch, rendering him and his new daughter a black and green blur to all that might have seen them. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Uchiha Madara frowned as he sat in the throne room of Princess Yukiya Fujika's. It had been well over a week since the Yukiya's vassals had made contact with the Kyuubi no Yuko container in Wave Country according to Zetsu. However, Zetsu further reports that Naruto has yet to show up at the boat to bring him to the land of spring. It would appear that he smelled a trap. Sly little devil, Madara thought to himself. Apparently, that stupid Jinchuriki was no longer the imbecile he once was. For if he had been, then the baka should have come running here as fast as his legs or a boat could take him. Naruto had always been headstrong and should have been easy prey for the remaining members of Akatsuki to capture. Alas, this was not so, and for not the first time in his life the first Uchiha cursed himself for founding that blasted village along with the first Hokage. Apparently somewhere along the way, this stupid Gaki had learned caution and now seemed to be exercising a great deal of it. Looks like this won't be as easy as I thought. Don't think I've forgotten our little game, Uzumaki. You may have gotten smarter since the war, but I will have my revenge, and once I have you in my clutches. A sinister cackle escaped him, as he gazed upon the havoc that he had wreaked throughout the land of spring, which was now covered once more in deadly blizzards, and lethal avalanches. Sooner or later he would have to come. Although the Kyuubi brat may have become wary of a trap, he would not leave a friend in need. Quote, comma, dot, dot. You will perish. His ranting was interrupted, as he felt the presence of Zetsu behind him, causing him to pause, and stare out into the snowy night from the lone window before him. Yes, what is it? The plant man hesitated a moment before speaking, both of his halves equally fearful to deliver the news that he was about to speak. Madara cut him off, as he stamped a steel-toed boot into the icy floor of the room, cracking it, and making the base shudder ever so slightly. His back was still turned, but you didn't need to see his face to know that he was not happy. You lost her, didn't you? Zetsu gave a stiff nod, and prepared himself for the worst, as he raised a hand in front of his face, to ward off a potential attack, fearing that his death had come. It never came. Leader Sama, was his nervous query, as he waited for an answer from the radically powerful Uchiha, who was not moving an inch. Tell Suigetsu and Deidara to continue their pursuit of her. Failure will not be tolerated. I want her found. Now. The deadly tone in his voice almost made Zetsu feel sorry for the two Akatsuki members. He gave a grateful bow, then turned to make his exit. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX abandoned factory. What the hell? Nell seemed more excited and asked. What's a factory? The scene was a gray and dreary one. A dark and abandoned factory set against the backdrop of the morning sun coated in mist. The only sign remaining of a long abandoned village that had stood quietly amongst the forest. It was peaceful despite the dull gray of the former plant, which stood out now amongst nature. However, that tranquil peace was soon shattered, as a section of the third floor was burst open, leaving a massive hole, from which a streak of gray and yellow leapt. The figure hit the ground with a loud thud, and the sheer force of her all forced her to one knee, as she had now broken something in her left leg. She wore a ragged outfit that was in tatters and her left arm hung loosely at her side, as it had been broken before she had smashed a hole in the wall. Fear was all over her face as she pressed a glowing green hand of chakra to her twisted ankle, calming the swelling, as she looked every which way, panic in her eyes. For just a moment, she dared to hope that she had lost them. She was wrong. Then, as if in slow motion, two figures in Akatsuki cloaks landed behind her, unfazed from their fall, whilst she was out of breath, and badly hurt. The one who held a sword sneered down at her, as she looked over her shoulder at him, fear all over her. Looks like you're outta luck. The other Akatsuki member Deidara smirked, as he reached into his clay pouch. She was running for dear life, but it looks like her time's up, huh? You gave us a lot of trouble back there. Frightened as she was, the woman still found the nerve to spit in the face of her captor, who gave her a disgusted look, as he wiped off the saliva. You little bitch. Deidara spat in anger. Suigetsu frowned at her defiance and unsheathed Samahata. Raising the infamous sharkskin scaled blade in his hand, Suigetsu once again felt grateful that Madara had blessed him with one of the legendary 7 swords of the mist after its original owner Hoshigaki Kisame had been killed during the Fourth Great Shinobi War. The young dark blonde woman stiffened, as she felt the rough skin of his shark-like blade on her neck. Help, she muttered weakly, but of course no one came. Naruto's ears pricked up. Help. Deidara laughed aloud. Help? Who would want to help a Jinchuriki? As the sword headed towards her in a downward arc and in a moment of desperation something inside of her snapped. Get away! She screamed. Instantly, a blue aura surrounded her and from that cloak-like chakra 2 tails burst forth, as her appearance became more feral, whilst the sheer intensity of her energy forced them back and away from her, as she screamed with fury at her 2 pursuers. Leave me alone. But then, much to her horror, the blue chakra cloak flickered out a second later, as exhaustion took its toll and left her gasping for breath and barely able to stand. Looking down at her hands, she felt her brief glimmer of hope fade away along with all feeling in her legs, as her knees buckled. "And no," she stammered, as her knees hit the ground, and just barely was she able to summon enough strength to catch herself on her hand, let alone try to summon forth the chakra again. She had nothing left. Suigetsu chuckled, as the chakra leaked into the bandages that wrapped his blade. "Thanks for the meal." Calmly he strode forward, sword in hand. "Now, since you won't behave, I think I need to take an arm." Time seemed to slow, as he raised his blade up and his jagged teeth formed a cruel smile on his face. The flow of time returned, and he swung his sword down. The defeated woman just closed her eyes, and waited for the pain. It never came, as she heard a fierce snarl and then a surprised cry. Fearfully, she opened her eyes and got the shock of her life. There was a tall blonde-haired man standing before her, and he was holding back the blade of Suigetsu with his own impressive sword. An amused grin appeared on his face, while Nell watched in safety from her hiding place in a nearby tree. With his other hand, he reached across to his mask and slowly, deliberately slid it on, indicating that he was in battle mode, as he sarcastically asked in a hollow metallic echo of a voice. "Mind if I join the party, boys?" The young woman was in dull shock, as a shadow clone of her savior helped her to her feet. Someone had heard her after all. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX leaf. He knocked out Shikamaru and beat up Choji so badly that he's now in a coma. The Yamanaka heiress nodded sadly. It had taken her 3 days to bring her injured teammates back to the Leaf Village. Ino was tired mentally, physically, and emotionally from this ordeal with Naruto. Yes, was all Ino could softly say due to her fatigue. Tsunade shook her head in mute shock before her gaze fell to a picture of Jiraiya and Naruto sitting on her desk, as she commented with sadness. He's changed these past few years, he's not the Naruto we knew, not anymore. Hokage-sama, I would like to request permission to pursue Naruto. I might be able to. Tsunade slammed her hands down upon the desk, as Ino winced from the explosive interruption. Absolutely not, you're part of the damn reason why he's like this. You are by no means to go after him. In fact, after what's happened, I should recall Team Guy before they encounter him. A knock was heard at the door, and she turned her wrath upon it. What is it? Tsunade roared, as she was in no mood for any pleasantries whatsoever. An anxious Anbu burst through the door, unaware of the current situation. Lady Hokage Tsunade, we have learned Hinata Inuzuka has gone missing and left the Leaf Village within the past few days. We only learned of this when we caught several Inuzuka clan members attempting to leave the village in pursuit of her. Under Anbu questioning, her husband and the Inuzuka clan heir Kiba Inuzuka believes that she has gone off in pursuit of the missing nin Naruto Uzumaki. For a moment nothing happened, as an eerie pall of silence fell over the Hokage's office before a shout erupted from the buxom blonde Hokage that seemed to echo throughout the Leaf Village. What? Despite the fact that his blade was being held at bay, Suigetsu was still confident that he could take this interfering little punk, as was seen by the jagged zigzag-toothed grin he gave the former Leaf Nin. So, it looks like our little Nibby vessel has a bodyguard. Then his eyes narrowed, as he recognized the sword his potential opponent held. That's Zabuza Senpai's blade. What is a peasant like you doing wielding one of the legendary 7 swords of the mist? I shall kill you for taking hold of it with your lowly hands. Naruto shook his head in amusement, as Yugito was set down against a nearby tree by his shadow clone. Lowly hands, huh? Well, better the blade in my hands than yours. Nope. I'm no bodyguard, I just happened to be passing through, when I came across you 2 ladies picking on that injured girl over there, and I wondered, why are the women of the Akatsuki attacking her? So I thought I would step in and ask you, missus. She's a Jinchuriki like you kid and holds the 2-tailed cat demon Nibby within her. Kyuubi voiced out inside Naruto's mind. Naruto relished the chance to blow off some steam, and who better to unleash it upon than the very organization that was causing him and others like him so much grief and pain. The death of these two would make for a fine message to send to Madara. A message that said, "You're next." A tick mark appeared on the faces of both Suigetsu and Deidara, who were not enjoying the insulting verbal jabs of their gender Naruto was saying to them, as they both angrily shouted in unison. "We are not women. Really? Are you sure? I mean, you both look like girls." Naruto commented in general surprise. "Well, we're not. Okay, if you say so, no need to get your panties in a twist." Suigetsu growled in rage before retracting his sharkskin scaled blade in his hand and raised the weapon, indicating he was ready for a fight. "Wait a minute, Suigetsu, I recognize this guy. He's the Nine Tails Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yuko. I haven't seen him since the war, but I'm sure it's him, Naruto Uzumaki." "Huh, this is the guy that defeated Sasuke-sama and the leader back in the war. I'm sure of it. Remember, Suigetsu, we need this guy alive as well as the Nibi vessel. If you do manage to wound him, don't make it lethal, or else Leader Sama will make us pay dearly," Deidara declared, while eyeing the rogue nin with wariness, as he did with all Jinchuriki unless they were belly up and dead. The former rock nin had learned caution the hard way when Sasuke had killed him years ago. If not for the Edo Tensei technique that Madara had used to revive him, Deidara knew he would still dead. Unfortunately, Madara was not as adept with the technique as Orochimaru or his protege Kabuto had been. If he got killed trying to take down the Kyuubi container, there would be no coming back, as the ancient Uchiha had warned him. Deciding that prudence was in order, he stepped back to let his hot-headed partner deal with the Jinchuriki. Suigetsu didn't seem to mind, as he was focused on other matters, particularly of how Naruto had gotten a hold of that weapon. "You have Zabuza's sword and he let you have it?" Suigetsu pondered in disbelief of how on earth this Gaki could have obtained the sword without being cursed like most grave robbers and other thieves who had attempted to steal the blade. "Does that mean he's unlocked the blade?" Deidara was also a bit taken aback when he felt the chakra slowly rising within Naruto to unimaginable levels and thought to himself, "This complicates things." The woman Naruto had rescued, however, seemed to doubt the combat ability of her savior. Using her unbroken hand, she tried to stand up, only for the clone to firmly place a hand on her unbroken shoulder and hold her down, thus preventing her from doing anything rash. Needless to say, she protested to this, but the copy held firm, easily keeping her in place despite her weak attempts to break free. "Baka," she called out, drawing a look from Naruto. You say something." Naruto casually replied in his hollow metallic echo of a voice and with those soulless eyes of his mask staring back at her. "Run!" she screamed, as she saw Suigetsu raise his sword to attack. "Run away. I'm a Jinchuriki and I couldn't beat them. What makes you?" She froze in mid-sentence, as red chakra began to bubble around Naruto, and peel off sections of his exposed skin. "Think you can win?" was her choked murmur, as not one, not two, but 4 tails of red chakra slowly grew out of the Kyuubi cloak that had enveloped Naruto, and she silently realized, "He's a Jinchuriki too." Naruto raised a red thumb, and for a second she could have sworn she saw him smile, even if it was behind the mask. The blonde Jinchuriki's tone was that of a teacher lecturing an ignorant student, calm but reproachful. "True, but you only have the Nibi." Now all sections of Naruto's exposed skin had peeled away, leaving his skin red, whilst oddly enough he kept his human appearance, clothing intact and everything. The leaf-missing nin then took up an attack stance, and although his voice was distorted, it was full of pride as well. "But I have the 9-tailed Kyuubi no Yuko demon, and with his power there is nothing I cannot do, especially against such a weak opponent like her." A second later, he threw back his head and let out an insane cackle, all the while Samahata was on a collision course with his head swung from the right and ready to lop it off in one brutal swing. Either this kid has finally lost it and has gone suicidal, or he actually does have the power to defeat us, and personally, I think it's the latter. Deidara quietly murmured to himself as he watched the battle unfold before him. As the blow came, Naruto simply ducked and it whooshed over his head, the wind current of the blow blowing his blonde hair sharply to the right, as he closed the thumb into his fist. That had been just a little too close for comfort, and looking over his shoulder, narrowed his red-black eyes at the former mist shinobi, who had now brought his blade back to the right and was ready to swing again despite the fact that his foe had dodged the first hit. Suigetsu, we need him alive. He's no good to us if you lop off his head. Deidara angrily shouted. Suigetsu paid no heed to his partner, as he didn't care about the leader's plan anymore and only wanted to retrieve Zabuza's sword for himself and to kill this unworthy peasant for daring to wield the weapon in the first place. As the battle began, rain clouds began to slowly come in, blocking off the morning sun and darkening the sky. Thunder began to rumble overhead, and anyone could tell that a storm was brewing up there and it was going to be big. Suigetsu swung his mighty and spiky-looking sword around once more, and everyone was astonished at the speed to which Naruto leapt over the wide swing and landed deftly on his feet. Unfortunately for Suigetsu, he had put too much effort into that second swing, which had left his sword hanging to the left and out of the way. In other words, he had just left himself wide open. That and the speed at which Naruto had moved was so unexpectedly fast was clouding his reaction time with shock and surprise. Years of training under a Sannin can do that to a guy. Surprised that Suigetsu had given him an opening, Naruto was not one to pass up such an opportunity in a battle. In a flash, his sword was coming down, as his own feet hit the dirt with a small tap. In fact, he just loved that. Oh crap, I just screwed up and now I'm gonna bleed, look his enemies had right before he inflicted his wrath upon them. However, Suigetsu bore no such look, as his was more confident. It was evident by the look on his face, that the former Mist Nin knew he had just blundered, and desperately he tried to bring his weapon about to block the incoming slash. Too slow. Naruto moved in the blink of an eye, easily hefting his own weapon with his right hand, and slashing down on his adversary. Unfortunately, Naruto's blade passed through his opponent's entire body as it had become liquefied in nature somehow. Still think I'm weak? Suigetsu hissed before he solidified and raised Samahata above his head once again and declared with laughing derision. Fool, you might be a better swordsman than I am, but with the enhancements shall we say that Orochimaru did to my body. You can never kill me or even hope to hurt me unless you can figure out a way to defeat water. Ha, ha ha. You have less brains than you have sword skills, Missy, Naruto declared, smirking at Suigetsu, who looked at the blonde Jinchuriki with confusion. What is the Nine Tails planning? Deidara silently wondered. The smirk on Naruto's face and his insult of his swordsmanship infuriated Suigetsu, and he furiously glared at Naruto before shouting in a rage. Damn you to hell, you bastard! When I get done with you there won't be enough of you left to stuff into a matchbox. Suigetsu then attacked once more, swinging his sword at Naruto in more complex forms related to the art of swordplay, involving a series of jabs, overswings, and underswings. Deidara watched on in fascination, as Naruto easily blocked or dodged all of his partner's sword strikes. This was quite entertaining for him to watch despite the predicament that his comrade seemed to be in. He didn't really care what happened to Suigetsu, as he never really liked him in the first place. The Two-Tails Jinchuriki felt like she was going to faint, from either the pain she was in or the shock of seeing this unknown man, practically playing with the Akatsuki member when she had gone all out and not even scratched him. It was almost enough to make her jealous, as she thought. And he's not even using all 9 tails. Naruto dodged almost every single one, almost. The last strike Suigetsu utilized involved a wide arc of a hit that if connected would in all likelihood destroy the upper half of his opponent. Deidara, however, was not thoroughly convinced that Suigetsu would win when the blow made contact with its target. When the blow did connect with Naruto, everyone noticed that the blonde Jinchuriki had plenty of time to dodge the strike, yet he just stood there to take the head-on attack. Idiot. Is he trying to get killed? Was the prevailing thought going through everyone's mind at that moment. But the only thing Naruto did to show he was trying to defend himself was to raise his chakra cloaked his left hand to catch the massive blow Suigetsu had unleashed. Holding onto Samahata tightly, the leaf-missing nin grinned at Suigetsu almost as if he was mocking the Akatsuki member before saying in a bored tone of voice. "Is that it?" Naruto commented in a bored tone of voice, revealing no pain in his words, but instead of someone who was clearly unimpressed by the attack. A gnawing fear then began to grow within Suigetsu, as he realized that he might be in over his head here. What the hell? Suigetsu exclaimed, suddenly finding himself afraid of someone other than Leader Sama when he was pissed off. As if on cue, Naruto got nasty right then and there, as his tone hardened, dripping with derision and disdain, whilst his chakra pressure suddenly flared around him, causing Suigetsu and Deidara to be rooted where they stood in fear. If this is all you got, Suigetsu, then your reputation among the 7 swordsmen of the mist has been clearly exaggerated. Naruto then pushed the shark-like blade away from him with the arm it came in contact with before slowly deepening his grip into the sword with his left hand and releasing a huge amount of killing intent that froze everyone in their place. "I don't like a sword that eats my chakra and pigs out on it shortly after getting a taste of what it considers a good meal. Your sword is like big dumb dog, or in this case shark, that can't stop eating until the food is taken away, and frankly it sickens me. Do you even know the inner workings of your sword?" Naruto asked in disgust, while pouring more chakra into the sword, but at the same time twisting it and turning it to his very whim. What or why you doing?" Suigetsu screamed in a panic when he realized that he couldn't pry Samahata away from Naruto or even let go of the blade. Naruto ignored his opponent's terrified question. "Did you know the main reason your sword can eat so much chakra is because it has its own small network of tunnels to take that chakra and circulate it around? Samahata does this to let it thin out and dissolve into the sword itself. However, just because this sword absorbs or eats chakra, it doesn't mean the chakra can't be manipulated by the very source it came from." What do you mean?" stammered the now panicking Akatsuki member, former Mist Nin, as he felt his hand which was gripping the sword start to grow hot. "What it means, Missy, is even as we speak I'm manipulating the Kyuubi's chakra into your stupid sword. And as I'm sure you're starting to feel that chakra is growing quite hot in temperature." Suigetsu suddenly screamed out in agony and looked down to see his hand holding Samahata begin to boil and bubble, as steam began to arise from it. Even worse, the boiling effect was beginning to travel up his arm towards the rest of his body. Desperately, then former Mist Nin tried to let go of the infamous sharkskin scaled blade in his hand, but to no avail as he heard Naruto say, "Don't bother trying to let go, the Kyuubi's chakra has locked your grip onto the sword. You know earlier you stated that I could never kill you or even hope to hurt you unless I could figure out a way to defeat water. Guess what? How about if I turn you into a cloud of steam? Does that hurt, and will that kill you?" Arg hhhhhhhh. A scathing cry of agony and anguish was the only answer Naruto received before Suigetsu became an unrecognizable mass of boiling water, which quickly rose into the air as steam before dissipating in the air completely, as Samahata fell to the ground in a thud. Naruto then turned his attention to Deidara only to find that the blonde Akatsuki member had made a hasty exit during his battle with Suigetsu. Naruto flashed a devious grin and was about to pursue the fleeing former rock nin when he suddenly stopped and now sensed a distinct chakra signature he recognized with annoyance, causing his red chakra cloak to recede back into him, as he growled out in anger. "You can come out, Tem. I can sense you now." Out of the shadows stepped Sasuke Uchiha, who walked calmly towards Naruto while saying, "Nice job with the water, freak Dobi." "Screw your praise, Uchiha. What do you want?" "I'm here under orders from Lady Tsunade to take you back to the village, Naruto." "Well then you wasted a trip, Tem, because I'm not going back. I'm done with Leaf Village now and forever. Quit being unreasonable, Dobi. I don't know what caused you to leave the village, but you can't stay out here. Madara and the other Akatsuki members we weren't able to finish off during the war are still out there. If they get a hold of the Kyuubi no Yuko, it will be the death of you and the end of us all. You need to come back to the village so we can protect you, Naruto. Well, as you can see, I can handle the Akatsuki just fine, so I don't need the village's protection. I'll deal with Madara when the time suits me. So go back and tell Ba-chan to just leave me alone. I can't do that, Dobi. You have only 3 options on this matter. 1. You come back to the Leaf Village with me peacefully. 2. You come back to the Leaf Village with me in pieces after I get done kicking your. Or 3. You leave me no option except to eliminate you per Lady Tsunade's decree to prevent the Kyuubi falling into enemy hands. I don't want to fight you, Naruto, so please just come back with me. I'm sure whatever it is that's bothering you can be fixed. You have a lot of people back in Konoha who care about you deeply. So, Ba-chan actually issued the death sentence on me if I didn't return like a good little dog. How typical, someone else who supposedly loved me turning their back on me for their own selfish reasons. This is all a bunch of bullshit. If there are people back in the village who love and care about me and want me to come home, it's only because they haven't had their shot yet to tear me apart like everyone else who has professed to love me has done. Well, them and you, Uchiha, I'm not going back, and that's final. Damn it, Naruto, I didn't want it to come to this. Sasuke angrily declared, before dropping into an attack stance 20 feet away from Naruto. We don't always get what we want, Em. A lesson you never learned, being the golden boy of the village who always got everything he wanted. However, it's a lesson I learned the hard way 3 times in my life. Sasuke could only shake his head sadly at his friend and was about to activate his Mangekyo Sharingan when a shout rang out. Back off, asshole. Instantly a fiery blast of blue chakra slammed into Sasuke from behind and sent the Uchiha hurtling through the air before he crashed into a stone wall of the abandoned factory, bringing the majority of it down on top of him. Naruto looked over to see the young woman he had saved from the Akatsuki enveloped in a blue chakra shroud which resembled a cat. However, the shroud soon disappeared when he saw her fall to one knee in obvious pain and exhaustion. Rushing over to help his fellow Jinchuriki, Naruto knelt down and offered his hand to the young woman, who looked up and said in desperation, "Forget about me, go finish that guy off I knocked into the wall before he recovers. That was the last shot of chakra I had and you've got to be running low after your fight. So hurry up and go kill that asshole before he wakes up." Ha, 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 I can't kill the Tem when he's unconscious. When we fight each other to the death, it will be when we're both at full strength. He deserves nothing less than that, and neither do I. You're a strange Jinchuriki. What is your name? My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, but most people call me Naruto. The blonde leaf missing nin answered, as he removed his mask. Namikaze. Are you related to the Yondaime Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, Minato Namikaze? He was my father. So your own father sealed the Kyuubi no Yuko demon within you, that's incredible. Yeah, it's been a barrel of laughs. So, I told you my name, what's yours? I'm sorry, my name is Nia Yugito, and as you have already figured out, I'm the Jinchuriki vessel of Nibi, the two-tailed cat demon. Well, Yugito, if you feel up to it, let's go track down that other Akatsuki prick who was chasing after you and give him a painful death. What do you say? Naruto asked, while picking up Samahata before sealing the mighty sword away into a storage scroll. Hi, I would like that very much, Namikaze-sama. Naruto, just call me Naruto, okay Yugito. Hi, Naruto-sama. We'll work on it. Hey Nell-chan, did you enjoy the show? Yugito looked up to see a little girl wearing a green dress with matching colored hair adorned with a strange-looking skull-type hat atop her head, sitting in the tree she had been resting against, clapping and smiling at Naruto. You're the Beth Naru-kun. Nell giggled happily in response. Come on Yugito, let me introduce you Nell, then we can go after Deidara and... Naruto stopped talking mid-sentence when he suddenly felt 3 all too familiar chakra signatures heading towards them at impressive speed. Pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration, the blonde Jinchuriki could think of only one thing to say. Ah crap, not them. Naruto knew exactly who the three guests heading towards him were and he was loath to fight them. In truth, he knew he could decimate all of them quite easily, but he had no desire to do so. The blonde Jinchuriki bore no ill will towards them other than the fact they represented the very place he was trying to get away from. No, I don't want to have to hurt them. Please Kami, send them away from here. However, it would seem that the great deity was ignoring his prayer, as rapid footfalls reached his Jinchuriki-enhanced ears. They were coming and they were coming fast. Great. Naruto hissed in aggravation, before he pulled his mask back on with a fierce tug. Reaching up, he quickly placed Nell onto his shoulder while sternly saying in his mask-distorted voice. Hang on Nell-chan, we've got to go and go right, now. Nell pouted upon hearing this, as she wanted to play with Naruto and his new friend. Ah, do we have to go? Then Nell's Arankar senses picked up the energy signatures of three people heading towards them and her pout quickly became a look of concern and she obediently wrapped arms around her adoptive father's neck and said. I'm all set Naru-kun, but what about the Lady Chan here? Naruto turned to look at the Yugito who was struggling just to stand and with a sharp intake of breath he realized that his adoptive daughter had a strong point. He couldn't just leave her here. What if the Akatsuki came back or what if the incoming trouble decided to take her back to the village for questioning? Naruto knew in her present weakened condition she would be defenseless. But if he took her with them he would be putting her in even more danger for what he has planned. Naruto was uncertain of what to do and in deep contemplation when the Kyuubi's voice cried out in his mind. Kit. They're less than a half mile from here and closing fast. You better decide what you're going to do quickly. Damn it. Naruto silently cussed. As if Kami was trying to make Naruto's life more difficult, the sky rumbled with thunder and a thick curtain of rain began to fall. Yugito stifled a surprised gasp when Naruto wrapped his arm around her waist and jumped straight up into the thick branches and foliage of the tree they were standing under. Setting his weary and injured fellow Jinchuriki down on a branch next to him and then checking to make sure Nell was secure. Naruto began to lower his chakra levels to an almost imperceptible level, maintaining only enough to utilize a henge jutsu to camouflage and blend them into the tree foliage completely, as he quietly stated. Nell-chan, Yugito, I need you two to remain as silent as possible. Nell merely nodded her head in acceptance and Yugito followed in suit, but shivered with fear at the sound of Naruto's masked voice and silently berated herself. It's just a mask. Quit being such a scaredy cat. Hey! Nibby shouted in her head in righteous indignation. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX wave country following the now cold trail of Naruto in hopes that she would run into him. It had taken her longer than she would have liked to get to the wave country upon hearing the rumor that the hero of that country had returned there. Unfortunately, Naruto was gone by the time she had arrived, and Tazuna had already passed the word around that anyone from Konoha inquiring about Naruto or his whereabouts was to be told nothing. Hinata had then spent a long and fruitless day of questioning the wave country inhabitants and receiving no information about Naruto. Disheartened, the former Hyuga heiress found herself at a local temple and weeping prayed to Kami to help her love Naruto. Kami must have heard her prayer because a woman who had just entered the temple heard Hinata's heartfelt prayer and the anguished tone in which it was given. The woman walked over to console the young woman, and after a few minutes of talking with one another, Tsunami realized this was not one of the people who Naruto needed protection from. Taking Hinata back to her house, the only daughter of Tazuna the bridge builder and the Wave Village's current chief and leader made certain her father shared any information he had about Naruto with Hinata, or there would be hell to pay otherwise. Afterwards, Hinata resumed her journey to find Naruto, as she quickened her pace and thought to herself, "Naruto-kun, where are you, my love?" Gone was her usual outfit, exchanged for a nondescript long black-sleeved shirt that fit her snugly and bore a kanji for hope on the back that Tsunami had sewn on for her. Also, she now wore long black hip-hugger pants along with knee-high boots, which made her plain outfit complete. Hinata also bore a black pack now worn over her left shoulder, and her leaf headband was nowhere to be seen. Hinata's once long indigo-colored hair had now been cut and was at shoulder length only, and tied with an orange-colored ribbon into a small ponytail. On the lower part of her face, she wore a white mask that hid the defining features of it. However, even with her face hidden except for her lavender eyes along with the alluring curves of her body, Hinata still she drew the stare of many a passerby, especially the men, so great was her natural beauty. Hinata also sported a katana blade strapped to her back as well, courtesy of a wave country mask maker she had questioned thanks to Tezuna's information. At first the man was reluctant to share anything, but it's amazing what a fistful of money and the threat of a jukin fist to his face unless he talked was enough to convince the old man to speak. After that, she had trekked on with the aid of a tracking hound she had borrowed from the Inuzuka compound, and they were following the scent of Naruto they had been able to detect from the mask maker's shop. Soon to Hinata's horror she came across the scene of a battle, and Naruto's scent was mingled with the unmistakable odor of blood, as was told her by said dog. Worried that Naruto had been injured, Hinata was relieved when the dog informed her that the blood came from two separate males and that there was also a scent of a female in the area as well. Naruto-kun must have run into an Anbu tracking squad, as most of them are set up with two males and a female on each squad. I pray to Kami he wasn't hurt. Hinata thought with concern before remembering that her sudden disappearance would also have Anbu after her, as she commented to herself. I hope I'm able to find Naru-kun before the trackers find me. Several hours later, Hinata soon found a campsite with the rotting corpses of several men strewn about. It was a gruesome sight, but then Hinata recognized the men as part of an infamous group of thieves called the Crimson Bandits she had been hearing about during her travels. According to her canine companion, Naruto's scent was intermixed with all the blood, proving he had been there and most likely had been the one to dispatch these men. After milling around a bit, the tracking hound had finally picked up the scent trail of which direction Naruto had left, and then the duo was off again in pursuit. After a short while, once again Hinata and her dog came across a scene of death. However, this time it was of a single individual, and by the looks of him Hinata wasn't even sure if the man was human. Aside from the fact that the man's head, which was adorned with some sort of skull-like mask on the left side of his face, was no longer attached to his body. The most peculiar feature of the corpse was that he bore 3 stumps instead of arms on the left side of his body and 2 stumps on the right side. Also, the lone remaining arm on the right side of the man's body and was holding some type of curved type of weapon. It saddened Hinata to know that Naruto was capable of such killing, but not surprising. After all, before he left, Naruto had broken Hatake Tsukumo, the legendary White Fang, and Hatake Kakashi father's record for most kills in Anbu history. It had garnered Naruto much praise and accolades throughout the village from both shinobi and civilians alike. Hinata knew that killing was a part of any shinobi's life and had accepted that long ago, but it was the brutality and viciousness of these killings that concerned her the most. Pushing her anxiety aside, Hinata asked her canine partner how long ago Naruto had been there and was pleased to hear that she was only a day behind. Unfortunately, the hound also informed her that Naruto was no longer traveling alone, as he could detect the scent of a female intermixed with his own. Now, a new anxiety was beginning to grow within Hinata. She was catching up to Naruto. But what would happen when she did catch him? What would he say? What would he do? Who was this girl Naruto is with now? The last question she had silently asked herself filled Hinata with the most dread. Suddenly, and for some strange reason, she stopped, drawing a confused look from the hound, as she gazed down at her left hand, her gaze narrowing to focus on her finger that bore the ring symbolizing her marriage to Kiba. This little gold ring had undoubtedly been part of the reason Naruto had left the village. It had been her fault. If only she could have told Naruto the truth 3 years ago. Maybe there could have been a way to stand up to her father. However, Hinata knew that there was nothing she could do other than what she did back then and heaved a heavy sigh of regret and frustration. Once she caught up to Naruto, she could finally tell him the truth and prayed Naruto would understand her reasons for marrying Kiba. But while Naruto may understand her reasons was no guarantee that he would still forgive her, and the thought of that filled Hinata with misery and terror. Then her thoughts turned to those of Kiba, and Hinata's face took on an image of anger. She did not love him, and he knew that. She loved Naruto, and he knew that as well. Yet the Inuzuka heir and supposedly one of Naruto's closest friends as well as her own did nothing to stop the arranged marriage. In fact, he had been as duplicitous as her father in the matter, and for that she hated him. Not to even mention what a sham of a marriage it had been during these past 3 years. Still, while Kiba and her father had been the catalyst, in the end there was only one person Hinata blamed for the marriage, and her own and Naruto's pain and unhappiness. It was all her fault. "You stupid ring, I never want to see you again. I hate you," she hissed loudly, and in one forceful movement she had plucked the ring from her finger and held it in the palm of her hand, as her body quivered with rage. Then, spying a nearby river, she heaved the ring with all her might into its briny depths. Then there was a crack of thunder, and the sky opened up in a rain as if to hide the tears streaming down her face. Hinata knew that with this rain her canine would no longer be able to track Naruto's scent. So, she now bid her tracking hound farewell, telling the dog that she could take it from here and for him to return to the Inuzuka compound. "You have been working hard and have been most helpful." With a grateful woof, the dog turned on its paws and headed off in the direction of the Leaf Village. Hinata then turned on her heels and full of determination resumed her trek to follow the trail of her love, albeit alone from now on as she thought of Naruto. However, Hinata was not the only one who was currently thinking of the once happy and playful blonde. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX tears misting in her emerald eyes at a picture of Naruto and her. Sakura had learned of Naruto's missing nin status when Shikamaru and Choji had been brought into the hospital with the injuries they had suffered by his hands. She was shocked at the extent of Choji's injuries and couldn't believe that the Naruto she knew would do that to one of his closest friends. However, Sakura then realized that the Naruto she knew was gone and the Naruto she had helped to create over the past few years, she didn't know at all. Sakura sat upon her bed, as she gazed upon the picture and reminisced about the happier times for him and her. The photo depicted the two holding hands with Naruto smiling from ear to ear, as Sakura leaned in to give him a kiss on the cheek. What was I thinking? The best thing to ever happen for me, and I threw him away like an idiot. Sakura screamed at herself in self-recrimination. That picture had been taken before Sasuke had been brought back to the leaf, before she had made the biggest mistake in her life in breaking Naruto's heart by choosing the Uchiha over him yet again. What's worse is that Sakura now realized that she had 3 wonderful years with Naruto before the blonde Jinchuriki had brought the Sasuke back, fulfilling his promise to her. And what does she do the moment that happens? Sakura thought to herself. I immediately go back into my 12 years old fangirl mode and forget about everything I had with Naruto-kun because I thought Sasuke would make me the happiest woman alive. Baka, she yelled at herself, while looking down at the photo. Soon, tears leaked from her eyes to fall on the photo that she was now clenching tightly to her chest, as her pink hair hung down into her face, while her body shook with sobs. Sakura was more miserable now than ever, now that she had realized that she wanted Naruto and had even broken off the engagement with Sasuke just for him. But she had been too late, years too late. Sakura had never seen him sadder or more broken than the day that she and Sasuke had informed him of their engagement. It hurt her even worse when Naruto lashed out with such anger towards them when they had pressed the issue with him. However, the pain of that night was nothing compared to the pain she felt when Naruto had erupted out with such venom and hatred at her when she had tried to apologize to him. Sakura remembered she was also going to inform Naruto of breaking her engagement with Sasuke just to be with him. Looking back at that now, Sakura wondered how stupid she would have been had she attempted it. She had taken his heart, and stomped on it just like she always had. Then, as her pink hair tickled her nose, Sakura felt something snap inside, as she made up her mind for the last time. Sakura wanted him, Naruto Uzumaki, and she would love no one else but him. With her hands shaking from remorse, anger, and grief, Sakura dropped the photo and reached under her bed for her shinobi knapsack. As soon as she found it, Sakura tucked the photo within the faded bag and then slinging the pack over her shoulder headed to the kitchen to get food and supplies, as she thought to herself. I'm going after Naruto-kun. I'm going to prove to him how sorry I am and how much I truly love him or die trying. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX As Yugito focused her eyesight through the rain, she saw a young man appear in a flash wearing green spandex and sporting bushy eyebrows looking around the area Naruto's battle had taken place. Wiping the rain from his eyes and blinking, he saw nothing but the battered remains of an old factory and a lone tree nearby about 100 yards away. Then a male voice called out from behind the young man. "See anyone, Lee?" The taijutsu master frowned as he kept searching, but saw no one as he replied. "I see no one, Neji, but it is difficult for my flames of youth to see through this torrential downpour. Are you sure this is the location where you spotted all of those strong chakra signatures?" A moment later, two more people appeared. One a girl with brunette hair tied into buns on the sides of her head, while the other was a male wearing the traditional robes of the Hyuga clan, who then activated his Byakugan and began scanning the area, piercing through all about him, as the colors faded to gray and his vision expanded to nearly 360 degrees. For a second, Neji paused and steeled his gaze towards the lone tree a short distance away. Naruto began to grow a little nervous before the sound of a brick falling to the ground diverted Neji's attention, and he shouted, "Over there, Lee, I detect a strong chakra signature underneath that rubble." In a moment, all three members of Team Guy were removing the bricks and stones, only to discover to their surprise that the source of that chakra signature was none other than Sasuke. As Lee and Tenten were helping the Uchiha to his feet, Neji asked with disdain dripping from his voice, "Why are you here, Uchiha?" "I'm here, Hyuga, because I'm under orders from Lady Tsunade to find and retrieve Naruto. He was here just a little while ago, but I wasn't able to capture him." So the great Uchiha failed. Neji spat with contempt. "I failed, Hyuga, because I got blindsided by a Jinchuriki woman Naruto had rescued from a couple of Akatsuki members." "What happened, Sasuke?" Tenten inquired, trying to diffuse the tension growing between him and Neji. "I found Naruto just as he had engaged one of the Akatsuki in battle. It was Suigetsu, my former subordinate in Team Hubby years ago. From what I could gather from the conversation during the fight was that Suigetsu and his partner Deidara were after the girl because she is Jinchuriki. They were about to capture her when Naruto stepped in and saved her. He took out Suigetsu without too much trouble and was going to go after Deidara when the Dobi sensed my chakra and called me out. Then what happened? At first nothing. I just tried to talk him into returning to the village and told him the consequences of what might happen if he didn't. But Naruto is so full of anger and pain about Konoha and the people within it that he refused to listen and said he is done with the Leaf Village now and forever. After realizing nothing I said would change his mind, I got ready to fight the Dobi, but then got sucker punched by the girl and he got away. It is sad that Naruto's flames of youth have been dampened over the years." "Well, you can thank the Hyuga's cousin for marrying the Inuzuka mud and turning Naruto into the man he now Lee. The Dobi should be grateful he didn't marry the tramp if her love could so easily go from him to Kiba. If Naruto had stayed with her, she would have only two-timed him behind his ba." Sasuke never got a chance to finish his sentence when a fist impacted his nose, breaking it and dropped the Uchiha to the ground. Before Sasuke could recover, a hand firmly gripped the front of his Anbu vest, pulling him up to look directly into Neji's enraged face, who had his fist back ready to deliver another strike, as spat with malevolence at him. "You arrogant Uchiha pig. To lay sole blame onto Lady Hinata for turning Naruto into the man he is now when you and that pink-haired bitch of yours had just as much a hand in causing Naruto pain is offensive. Get your hands off of me, you Hyuga freak. Sakura and I haven't done anything to Naruto. Really, Uchiha? Well, let me tell you what you and your whore did to him. Neji. Tenten sternly shouted out, stopping the young Hyuga before adding. Remember what Naruto asked and that you gave your word to. After a few intense seconds passed, Neji let go of Sasuke with frustration and disgust before nodding to Tenten in understanding. However, it was not easy for the Hyuga male, as hearing Sasuke lay complete blame onto Hinata for what has happened to Naruto so infuriated him he hadn't even bothered to activate his Byakugan or even deliver a Juken strike. Sasuke had merely received a straight blow to the face powered by nothing more than his rage and contempt he felt for the Uchiha. Taking a moment to calm himself, Neji glared back at Sasuke and said, Lady Hinata's marriage to the mongrel was a disturbing event for all of us and none more so than Hinata herself. I cannot tell you, Uchiha, why she went through with it, as I do not know. However, I suspect that there is a reason that none of us know about for why she did. And it has nothing to do with her loving Kiba over Naruto. In fact, I can assure you that Lady Hinata has never stopped loving Naruto and has suffered greatly these past 3 years because of it. Naruto's face grimaced in pain as he heard Neji's words with his Kyuubi-enhanced hearing. Unfortunately, he knew the truth as he had given Hinata a chance to explain why she was marrying Kiba. Regrettably, she never did. As Neji's words also sunk into Sasuke's head, he was about to ask why the Hyuga was placing blame on him and Sakura. However, before he could inquire further, a messenger falcon streaked down from the sky and landed upon Lee's shoulder. Tenten quickly unfurled the message attached to the bird's leg and read it. What does it say, Tenten? Lady Tsunade is recalling us from searching for Naruto. We're to report back to the Leaf Village at once for further instructions. Very well, since we missed our opportunity to capture Naruto in the first place. We'll spend the night in that small town we passed a few miles back to get out of the rain before returning to the Leaf Village. Come, Tenten. Lee, I wish to get out of this interminable downpour as soon as possible. Neji ordered with authority to his 2 teammates. As Lee and Tenten followed behind Neji, the kunoichi paused and turned around to ask. Sasuke, do wish accompany us and get out of the rain? No, I've got someone I need to see and they are about 2 days' travel from here. Suit yourself, Tenten replied, as she watched Sasuke leap away before running to catch up with her teammates. Once the sound of the voices of Team Guy had finally faded away, Naruto breathed a sigh of relief, as he removed his mask and jumped down to the ground with Nell secure on his shoulder. They were safe. For now. Yugito jumped down from the tree and fell to one knee as she landed. It was quite evident that she was still very weak from her battle with the Akatsuki. Looking up, Doe brown eyes met sapphire blue and in that instant she looked down, as he extended his hand to her, whilst Nell stared at Yugito with piqued curiosity. Hesitantly, Yugito grasped Naruto's hand and allowed him to help her to stand before she asked. Who were those guys? I have little time so I will make this quick. Those guys were Anbu from the Hidden Leaf Village and they are in pursuit of me because I'm a missing nin from that village. Now, I could leave you here. Naruto momentarily saw panic flash through Yugito's eyes, before it vanished and was forced down by her, as he mentally commended her for that feat. She controls her emotions well. But, that would leave you easy prey to the Akatsuki, who are the ones who attacked you, by the way. I know all about the Akatsuki, I've been their prisoner for the last 8 years. Yugito spat with anger and disgust. If she's been a captive of the Akatsuki, perhaps she will be of use to us. You should take her along, kid, and get whatever information you can from her. Plus, once she's healed, she could be a powerful ally since she holds the Nibi. And even you have to admit she's not bad to look at either. Perhaps you and her could even. Kyuubi voiced out within Naruto's mind. Knock it off, you perverted fox. Your other points are valid, but I'm not going to ask her to join us just so I can get laid. Well, you should, Kit. You've been living like a monk for the last 2 years ever since that blonde bitch dumped you, and I'm sick of it. I want see some action. Enough. I'm not having this conversation with you right now. Naruto shouted back with righteous anger before turning his attention back to Yugito. Well, since you know about the Akatsuki and what they do. As a fellow Jinchuriki, it would not sit well with me to leave you on your own against them. Naruto then stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder, whilst his other went under her arms to support her. Yugito's face blushed red at this, but it was only for the briefest of seconds and it was gone before he could notice it. Naruto was too caught up in those eyes of hers anyway. He had been staring into those deep brown pools the entire time and he felt hypnotized by her calm yet slightly nervous stare. Naruto's next words finally got her mind working again, as shock and surprise set in. Care to join up with us? Yugito's eyes widened a bit at that, but after seeing the way he had dispatched Suigetsu with less than half his true strength. The voice of the Nibi, the two-tailed cat demon, purred her inside her mind. The tone of that cat was laced with curiosity, as which all felines were infamous for. That, and what felt like desire. I think we would be safe with this one kitten. Even though I can sense he is troubled and harboring a lot of pain and anger, he also seems to be of pure heart, and if he is indeed the vessel of the Kyuubi, then perhaps we could. Nibi's thoughts stopped there, as Yugito forcefully protested with all her might. Whoa, Miss Pervert. Don't be getting any ideas there, I don't even know him. That can easily be solved and you know what I mean. Nibi seductively purred. The sound of Naruto's voice interrupted Yugito and Nibi's conversation. So about my offer, interested? There's safety in numbers after all. Okay. If I say yes, I just have one condition. Yugito replied before she brought her face dangerously close to his, and Naruto blushed a bit at that. Her voice held just a hint of desire as she spoke. Will you treat me right? With respect, I mean. Of course I'll treat you with respect. Thank you, Naruto-sama. Again with the sama. Oh well, like I said, we'll work on it. Naruto thought to himself before saying. Sure. Now let's go. I have a. The blonde Jinchuriki was interrupted when he heard the screeching sound of the flare, long before its ruby-red light lit up the sky for miles around, casting a red curtain of light about all nearby. He stared at it for a moment, then ever so slowly, a predatory grin formed on his face. A second later, he was running towards it with Yugito in hot pursuit, calling out to him, as she struggled to keep up. Where are we going? To get me an army. Naruto's tone was filled with arrogant confidence, as he took to the trees, all the while with Nell chatting away in his ear. Naru-kun, ith the cat lady going to be living with uth from now on. Hi Nell-chan, she'll be traveling with us for a while. Yay, maybe she can be that wife-chan you need. The simultaneous squawk of surprise from the two Jinchuriki could be heard for miles around. Nani? XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX massive force and soaring high above the tree tops. Naruto then saw the clearing ahead, which the red flare seemed to be hovering over. Beneath it, in its red glare was a man, the bandit Naruto had let live to contact the bandits' leader. The man was alone and shivering inside a tent to shelter him from the rain. It looks like my message was delivered after all, Naruto thought to himself. Even though he did not see Yugito, he knew that she too was focused on the clearing and the man inside the tent as well. For her part, Yugito cast a quick glance at Naruto and she saw a sly grin on his face. The sight of his stoic, yet strong and handsome face sent a shiver running down her spine and then throughout her entire body. And what confused her was, it wasn't necessarily a bad shiver. She actually liked that fierce and savage look on his face. It meant he had a firm grip of himself and that he takes no orders from anyone and would do whatever the hell he wanted. She desired that in a man. Someone who was aggressive and passionate and wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Nibby noticed this as well, her tone laced with amusement, as she noticed the light blush on the face of her vessel. Oh, are you getting the hots for him, kitten? Yugito's blush deepened for a moment, before she silently hissed back at her demon. Shut up, you stupid cat. Don't blame me, I just call them as I see them. Casting another quick glance at him, she looked away before he could feel the sensation of her penetrating eyes upon him. I have no idea what you're talking about. However, Nell had noticed the strange glances that Yugito kept sending towards Naruto. And being an inquisitive child asked her adoptive father a question. Naru-kun, why did the cat lady keep looking at you so funny? A bit taken aback by this question, Naruto stammered in response. I don't know Nell-chan, I didn't know she was. This answer did nothing to quell Nell's curiosity about the situation before her eyes grew wide as saucer plates and she gave a startled declaration. Oh, I know what it. Hey cat lady, are you still thinking about being Naru-kun's new wife Chan? For the second time that night, a simultaneous squawk of surprise erupted from the two Jinchuriki and could be heard for miles around. Nani? Below, in the clearing, Daisuke, the man who Naruto had threatened with death, looked up as he thought he heard a startled shout and thought to himself. What was that? Daisuke wore a dark muscle shirt that fit well against his muscular frame, along with long baggy pants that were already soaked through with rain. Strapped to his back was an enormous shuriken, easily twice the size of the one Mizuki had worn, and it was apparent that only one such as he with his titanic strength could wield such a weapon. But strength or no, he was still very nervous as he peeled back a strand of brown hair, long and unruly much like Kiba's hairstyle, which was now wet and soggy, as he pulled the hair away from his black eyes and he peered about into the rain, looking for any sign of the missing nin. What if he did not show? Leader Sama would think he had failed, and he had no desire to fail. He had to show up. His very life depended on the presence of this, unimaginably, powerful nin he had described to his boss, who had given him the benefit of the doubt and allowed him to come back out here to extend to the man an invitation to meet him. Or was it a he? No one had ever seen the face of the leader, nor did they know if a woman or a man led them. She was always wrapped in a dark robe and wore a face mask distorting her voice, thus further obscuring the identity of the powerful leader of the mighty gang known only as the Crimson Blades. But when he had mentioned the name of Naruto Uzumaki, he had visibly seen a difference in the way leader held himself. I want you to bring him to me. I wish to meet him. Those had been the specific words of the leader, and everyone in the Crimson Blades knew that she did not tolerate failure. So, for some reason, he decided to look up into the sky, and just as he did he saw two black shapes in the air, one of which had a very familiar sword strapped to his back. Is that him? Something in his gut told him yes. There was no way you could mistake the dark energy that even from this distance, was emanating from him, making his blood run cold and his tan skin go pale. It is. With a startled yelp he leapt back, his sandals sliding in the mud and bringing him to his knees. No sooner had he moved, than, the two specks of black rocketed down to earth, one of them landing right where he had been mere seconds before, shaking the ground with the impact. As Naruto rose to his feet, his mask now donned and making him a truly fearsome sight to behold. Despite the rain that was clouding his vision, Daisuke could tell by that mask. It was him. Naruto's yellow-black eyes bored deep into the startled black of Daisuke's, as he rose to his feet and said. It's a good thing you did as you were told. I knew you were smarter than you looked. Tell me, did you set up a meeting between your boss and me? Hi Naruto-sama, my boss does wish to meet with you and has ordered me to escort you to our encampment. Daisuke humbly replied, before he noticed Nell and Yugito and asked. Who are the brat and the babe? A second later, a hand was wrapped around Daisuke's throat and he felt his large frame lifted into the air effortlessly, as Naruto growled out. The brat and the babe are with me. And if I ever hear you refer to them by those names again, it will be the last words you ever speak. My apologies Naruto-sama. Daisuke stammered in a choked voice. After a moment, Naruto released his hold and Daisuke fell to the ground in a heap. Rubbing his throat, Daisuke looked over to see Nell sticking her tongue out at him and giving the bandit a raspberry, while Yugito glared menacingly at him. Daisuke gulped nervously, as he could feel a great power radiating off the statuesque blonde. The Crimson Blade bandit made a quick mental note of not to piss off this woman in the future. It was then that Naruto's metallic echo of a voice cut through the air once more. So when do we go see this leader of yours? What is your name? My name is Daisuke Naruto-sama and we will see the leader tomorrow, as soon as the escort squad arrives to take us to him. Very well, that works for me. My companions and I are weary and could use a good night's sleep. And it will be nice to get out of this accursed rain for a while. My apologies Naruto-sama, but I did not know you would be traveling with companions since the last time I saw you. I'm afraid the tent I brought is only big enough for 2 people to occupy. That's not a problem. Nell-chan is small and can sleep in between Yugito-chan and myself. Yugito felt her cheeks blush a bit at hearing the suffix, chan, added to her name. But where will I sleep Naruto-sama? Daisuke questioned. Naruto released a slight bit of killing intent and his eyes flashed from their yellow and black to crimson red before he declared in no uncertain terms. You won't be needing any sleep, as you will keep watch during the night. You don't have a problem with this, do you Daisuke? No Naruto-sama, I don't have a problem with that. Daisuke stuttered as the pressure of Naruto's killing intent made him weak in the knees. The Crimson Blade bandit then made his way over to a tree to try and get some shelter from the rain, while Naruto and his companions entered the tent for a well-deserved rest. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX girls finished breakfast when the blonde missing nin sensed several chakra signatures approaching. Motioning to Yugito to be on alert and watch over Nell, he waited patiently to see who was coming. A few minutes later, a voice from the forest called out in an annoyed tone. Is he here yet, Daisuke? This demon, of yours? Hi Sakari, he's here. A moment later, several thug-like men emerged from the forest, followed by a tall man with long red hair and dressed in a formal red kimono. A look of disdain marred his features, as he beheld the threesome, his arms hidden in the folds of his robe and crossed over his chest. So this is your demon? He looks like any other man, and by the looks of him not a very strong one. A few of the men surrounding Sakari snickered at that comment before Daisuke shot him a glare, annoyed at the perpetual arrogance of his comrade. You would be wise not to make him angry, Sakari. He took out my squad in less than a minute flat. I'm sure he would do the same to you, in half the time. Naruto arched a blonde eyebrow and silently mused. There seems to be some bad blood between these two. Once again, the robed man known only as Sakari looked upon the ragtag group, and now his dark eyes focused on Yugito and Nell, who stuck out her tongue at him. Who are these two? Daisuke made no mention them. Naruto finally spoke now, his voice dark and ominous as he put his mask on, sending a nervous shudder through Daisuke, who had witnessed the fearsome power of this rogue nin firsthand. They're with me. I met them only recently, after I dealt with your little group of bandits. Naruto's tone left no trace of guilt whatsoever, but still Sakari was unfazed. And what make you think you are worthy of joining the Crimson Blades? Surely you don't think senseless slaughter will get you anywhere. Yugito rolled her eyes, as Naruto reached for the hilt of his blade, his right hand clenching and unclenching as he did so. Great, that idiot is going to piss him off and he's gonna start a fight. The Nibi vessel thought to herself. But as Naruto gripped the handle, he paused, and his gaze met that of Daisuke's once more, ignoring the rant of Sakari. What did your boss say? Daisuke, now recovering himself, reached into the waterproof pouch he kept at his side, his hand trembling slightly from both fear and worry, as he opened the pouch and groped around for something within it. Leader Sama has expressed interest in you and would like to meet you, preferably in person. Does that include my two comrades? I won't leave them behind. Daisuke paused at that and then, with a sneering glance at Sakari, shrugged his shoulders. I don't see any reason why they can't come along. Sakari frowned at this and spoke once more in a sneering tone. Wait a moment, I never gave you permission to. Sakari suddenly found himself stifled, as Naruto drew his sword and held the large blade to the throat of the pale man, his eyes gleaming with murderous intent. I'm growing tired of you, so silence, fool, unless you wish to be deprived of your head. Sakari paled even more, looking white as a ghost now. You would not dare. Try me. Naruto hissed venomously before adding. I've dared to do a lot of things lately. One more wouldn't hurt. A murmur passed through the gathered thugs, as they looked from Naruto to Sakari, as no one's ever done that to Sakari before. Naruto now turned to Daisuke and gave a small nod, as the muscular bandit found what he sought, a brown piece of parchment. Give it to me, Naruto sternly ordered. Daisuke did so, tossing the wrapped box to Naruto, only for Nell to snatch it out of midair and hand it to her adoptive father instead, who still held the blade to the throat of Sakari with murderous intent in the eyes of the robed man. If you kill me, Leader Sama will not allow you. Sakari wasn't able to finish his sentence, as Naruto snarled and Naruto moved the blade to the left and with a hard tug in that direction whipped it around, giving the man a nasty gash that traveled from his chin to his shoulder blade. Immediately, it began to bleed, and with a horrified scream, the man placed both hands over it, in a vain attempt to stifle the blood loss. Annoying worm, Naruto hissed, as he sheathed his weapon and looked over the contents of the package he had been given. Several of the men rushed forward to tend to the wounds of the pompous fool, who was now writhing in agony, his body convulsing on the ground wildly, as he twisted every which way in pain. Your arrogance will now serve as a constant reminder. If you live through this, that scar will haunt you for the rest of your days. Turning to Daisuke, he saw the smirk the Crimson Bandit was leveling onto Sakari and mentally made a note to consider recruiting this one. Let's go, I don't have all day to waste with these fools. I have an errand to run first before I meet with your boss. You may accompany me if you so choose, Daisuke-san. But before they could make any move to set out, it was there. All of a sudden, right out of the blue, he felt a very familiar chakra signature and he hissed in surprise, just as he heard her footsteps and thought. It can't be. Hinata. What the hell is she doing here? Then, bursting out of the trees, the Hyuga girl made her grand entrance, sword drawn and held at the ready. But as soon as she saw him, mask and all, it dropped from her fingers, to clatter onto the muddy terrain. Her eyes grew wide with recognition, and with a sharp tug, she pulled down the mask that she wore, exposing her lovely alabaster face, as she spoke with tears welling in her soft lavender-colored eyes. Naruto-kun. Is that why you? Time seemed to stand still, as Naruto ever so slowly turned to face Hinata, his yellow eyes gleaming out from behind his mask. For her part, Hinata's eyes widened in recognition of him, her sword clattering to the ground with a clang. The arrival of the indigo-haired beauty sent a murmur through the ranks of the Crimson Blades, who briefly paused their tending of Sakari's wound to look at the beautiful woman standing before them. Whoa, who's the babe? Seemed to be the prevailing thought with most of the bandits. Daisuke was equally thunderstruck by the curvaceous beauty before him, despite the fact that she was pretty much ignoring him and everyone else present save for the blonde Jinchuriki. Daisuke saw the pleading and loving look she was giving Naruto, but then frowned as he saw no reaction whatsoever from the rogue nin and thought to himself. Does he know her? Is she going to join up too? Judging by the way she's giving him those baby doll eyes, she certainly knows him. Then Sakari was remembered, and with a regretful sigh, Daisuke ordered his bewitched men to get back to work, patching up the rather nasty gash Naruto had dealt the unfortunate man now unconscious from blood loss. Daisuke, I want some privacy. Naruto sternly ordered. As you wish, Naruto-sama. Hurry up and move, you idiots. Leader Sama won't tolerate an unnecessary death even if it's a fool like Sakari. With a groan they set about moving Sakari off into the distance, ignoring the shriek of pain from the robed man while they did so. As one man inserted a threaded needle into the bleeding wound and began to stitch it shut, threading the pointed tip in and out with slow and careful precision. Ow. OWWWWW. But Hinata paid no attention to the departing gruff man, the bandits, or the wailing Sakari, as she pulled down her own mask revealing her lovely face, which looked like that of an angel. An angel who was now seeing her first true love in a new light, a light of pure joy at seeing that he was alive and unharmed. Naruto-kun, is that you? Hinata asked, her soft and gentle voice sending shivers through him, as he suppressed the urge to run to her, take her in his arms and hold her tight. He was forcing it down, with sheer willpower, barely rooting himself in place, as his body suppressed a shudder as well. What is she doing here? She can't be here. Not now, were the thoughts that raced frantically through Naruto's mind, desperately trying to uphold his calm facade and demeanor, but secretly thankful for the mask that hid the anguish on his face. Had his visage not been blocked, Hinata would have seen the uncertainty reflected in his eyes. She might have reacted to that and taken the initiative to hug him or even kiss him, as she had long ago to assuage his doubts and fears. If Hinata did that, Naruto knew he might crumble, and showing such emotions would ruin his plans, and he could not allow that. Meanwhile, Yugito eyed the strange woman warily. The former Cloud Kunoichi instantly recognized the features of a Hyuga, and her brown eyes filled with suspicion of the girl. However, before she could act or say anything, Nell chose that moment to speak, as she gazed at Hinata with curiosity. Huh, how do you know Naru-kun? At this, Hinata felt a small smile light her face at hearing confirmation that she had indeed found Naruto, but she could still feel the thick tension in the air. So it is you, Naruto-kun, was Hinata's happy chirp, as she took a step forward. Unfortunately, the response from the man she loved was not what she had been expecting, as she suddenly met the business end of Naruto's blade. Its deadly point held less than an inch from her face, causing Hinata to stiffen and tilt her head back a bit, followed by a hesitant step backwards. Naruto had drawn his weapon at an inhumanly fast speed and was making it clear to Hinata that he saw her as an enemy. You're a long way from home, what are you doing out here in Izuka-san? Naruto hissed venomously, as he glared at her before adding in a spiteful tone of voice. Are you here to bring me back? Here to fight me, like everyone else? Maybe you thought because of our past, that I would meekly follow you back to the village, or maybe into an ambush set up by the Anbu, or perhaps your loving husband. Upon hearing how he addressed her and the words he said, a chill went up Hinata's spine and a sense of guilt and pain rushed through her body. Naruto's mention of Kiba and the glare he leveled onto her even through his mask broke Hinata's heart. The former Hyuga heiress missed the way Naruto used to look at her. The way Naruto would speak softly to her when she was sad and when she was lonely. The way Naruto always supported and comforted her. Hinata felt sick to her stomach in realizing her marriage to Kiba had forever changed Naruto. She'd always believed Naruto would forgive her, and the old Naruto that she used to know would have. However, this new Naruto she had helped to create was different. He wasn't forgiving, he wasn't warm, comforting, and reassuring. That meant she'd lost Naruto a long time ago. That meant Naruto had been over her for 3 years and had been very angry and bitter towards his thoughts on her, while she never wavered in her thoughts of love for him during that same time. A look of sadness appeared upon her face, as she stared down his blade, her soft lavender eyes gently peering into his, as if silently trying to convey how sorry she is for hurting him before finally speaking in a voice filled with guilt and sorrow. Naruto-kun, if you're happy away from the village, then so am I. I would never fight you or betray you by leading you into a trap. Naruto's hand trembled a bit at the mournful tone of Hinata's voice, and like his hand, his blade also trembled, causing it to lower an inch, as his resolve was beginning to waver. However, an image of Hinata's wedding day flashed across his mind, and his resolve quickly hardened again, and he held his Zanbakuto firm, his soulless eyes boring into her soft and caring ones, as he angrily spat with vicious sarcasm. Nice to know one betrayal is all you can inflict upon me in Izuka-san. If you're not here to lead me back to Konoha like a puppy on a leash held by you, then why are you here? Surely you didn't come just to exchange pleasantries with me. Yugito did speak now, her tone calm, yet masking the anger and confusion beneath, as she muttered under her breath. You know her. Her fellow Jinchuriki nodded, never taking his eyes of the Hyuga, as he spoke, venom still laced in his voice. Hi, I know her. At one time we once spoke of getting married, but that was before she decided to move up the social and political ladder of the Leaf Village and marry the heir to one of the great clans of Konoha. Hinata looked down to the ground in shame, while Yugito frowned upon hearing this and becoming more vocal now asked in angered curiosity. Why did you leave your village anyways? Is she part of the reason? When he spoke, the pain was clear in his voice, dark, and deep, like the night. Hi, she's part of it but not all of it. I was betrayed 3 times by people I loved and who professed to love me back, but they were all lies and what's worse is I. Naruto paused to regain control of his emotions in a visible effort, clenching his free hand into a fist, as he added in a shaky tone of voice. And what's worse is I allowed each betrayal to happen like the fool I was, that's all you need to know. Yugito stifled a gasp at this, and when she looked at him, as those normally hard and arrogant eyes were now filled with sadness and loneliness. Yugito knew that look oh too well and turned her head to gaze at Hinata with hate and anger. Meanwhile, Nell had looked up at her adoptive father and she too noticed and felt his sadness before she instinctively jumped up onto his shoulders and hugged Naruto's head to her body. Giving him a gentle squeeze, she spoke in childlike innocence soft words to only be heard by him. You're not alone, Naru-kun. Nell is here too now. Naruto was at a loss for words and knew not what to say. He barely even knew this child and here she was being kind to him. He was rendered speechless by her simple words and kind gesture. Hinata felt the killing intent Yugito was leveling on her and finally noticed the statuesque Jinchuriki, and as soon as she saw the blonde, clad in her torn and ruined outfit, she thought the worst. Naruto had already found someone. Nani? Who's that? Is she? Hinata dared not think the rest. Naruto snatched away from her by this gorgeous blonde. The thought was too much to bear. However, as much as Hinata wanted to drive these thoughts away, Yugito's appearance did little to help in that endeavor. The former Cloud Kunoichi's outfit was indeed in tatters. The form-fitting clothing had been torn and shredded at the waist, revealing her tan stomach, exposing her curves, and accentuating the dip of her waist. The lower portion of it held, fitting snugly against her rear, but as it reached her knees, it seemed that the legs of the fabric had been torn away by a ragged edge. The upper portion of her shirt was relatively intact, but still the fabric clung tightly to her well-endowed chest that could almost rival Hinata's ample bosom. All in all, she looked like an Amazon, fresh out of the rain forest, a goddess on earth, and here she was with her Naruto-kun. A tick mark appeared on her head and she released her own substantial killing intent onto Yugito, as she pictured the two of them together, in all sorts of activities. Yugito seemed to realize this as well, and with a hmmph of disdain, her brown eyes bored into the pale lavender of Hinata's, who put her hands on her hips, as did Yugito, the two kunoichi staring down each other with fierce intent. Hinata could see the disdain in them, held for her, as the Jinchuriki shot her the mother of all death glares. To which the young Hyuga girl returned her own deadly glare towards the Nibi container. Just as Yugito was about to step towards Hinata, she was cut off by a glare from Naruto, which stopped her cold, the sight of his yellow-black gaze rendering her speechless. Wait before you pass judgment. I still have questions to ask of her. Looking back to Hinata, Naruto reached up to his mask and removed it, giving Hinata a look at the face that she loved so very much. Naruto lowered his blade and with a flip of his wrist tossed it up into the air. A second later, he twisted his head to the right, allowing his weapon to slide into the sheath he wore on his back, with a loud clink. Nell was eyeing Hinata with intense curiosity at seeing how she affected Naruto before her eyes lit up and she asked her adoptive father. Is the lady with the pretty eyes going to be a wife-chan for you, Naru-kun? Hinata's face turned beet red just like she when she was younger, whilst Naruto guffawed in shock for the second time his energetic adoptive daughter had said such a thing. Wife-chan. Hinata sputtered, as the dream she had held for such a long time of being Naruto's wife raced through her mind once again. A small sigh of happiness escaped her, as Nell had inadvertently brought up one of Hinata's fondest wishes. Turning around, the Hyuga girl gazed lovingly at Naruto. Unfortunately, much to her distress, the look he directed towards her was cold and unyielding before he saw her right hand and the lack of something that should have been there. "Where's your ring?" His words were a murmur, but still they were heard by Hinata, whose eyes widened, as she remembered what she had done to the small gold band. Of course, how could he not notice that? Hinata thought to herself before realizing this was an opportunity to make her intentions known to him, the reasons for leaving her home, to pursue him, to finally explain everything to Naruto once and for all. Taking a step forward, then another, and when he did not make any move to draw his weapon, she steadied her pace and kept striding across the muddy terrain until she was less than a foot away from him, her eyes gazing deep into his, as she looked up at him. "I threw it away," Hinata sternly declared without hesitation before she saw him stiffen, and knew that she had now crossed the point of no return. Now she had to continue lest Yugito do something, or she falter in her resolve. "You did what?" was Naruto's surprised query, as Yugito eyed Hinata warily. Hinata turned her face away from his for a moment before speaking, a light pink blush upon her cheeks as she spoke, softly at first, then with ever-strengthening resolve, every word, every syllable increasing her confidence tenfold, as her tone, ever kind and loving, grew firm, before she finally looked back at him, to find him patiently listening. "I want you and only you, Naruto-kun. I only want to wear your wedding band, not Kiba's." Hinata sees Naruto bristle and look away at the mention of her teammate, but she calls out his name, drawing his cold gaze back to her. "Naruto-kun, listen to me. I threw it away. I threw Kiba away. I left the village to find you, because I want to be with you." Inhaling a deep breath, Hinata spoke the words she never thought she would have the chance to say again, at least not to his face. The words were forceful, and shouted right to his face, stunning him with their intensity. "Damn it, Naruto-kun, I love you." At those last three words, Naruto's visage softened a bit and he let out a tired sigh, as he placed his right hand upon her right cheek, causing her to nuzzle her face into his open palm before he pulled his hand away and said, "You don't get to say that to me, Hinata, not after what you did 3 years ago. You destroyed me. Why should I even believe you? I watched you give without protest your hand in marriage to Kiba and the promise of a life with you. That was something I valued just as much as the title of Hokage. What did you think? That a bullshit declaration of love from you and that I would fall to my knees in gratitude and we could pick up where we were 3 years ago? Sorry, but that ain't happening. I'm not taking you after you went through all those things with Kiba, and gave him everything I wanted. It's not bullshit, Naruto-kun. I do love you. I always have, even during my marriage with, and I always will love you no matter what happens." Hinata softly spoke in a choked voice, as tears began to stream down her face. The sadness in Hinata's voice and the tears she shed tugged at Naruto's heart, and he did not like the feeling, as he angrily responded. "Even if that's true, then why, Hinata, why? If you've always loved me and still do, then why did you obediently agree to marry Kiba in the first place?" "I did it to save my sister and Konohamaru," Hinata shouted back through her tears and anguish. What?" Naruto said with bewilderment. Looking up at Naruto's confused face, Hinata exhaled a heavy sigh to try and calm herself before speaking once more. "I married Kiba to save Hanabi and Konohamaru, Naruto-kun. When my father and Kiba first approached me with the arranged marriage, I vehemently refused. Even when my father threatened to have me branded with the caged bird seal unless I agreed, I still told them no and informed them I would marry you and only you. This angered both my father and Kiba greatly. My father because Kiba had paid him a great deal of money for my hand in marriage, and Kiba because he wanted me so badly. They then informed me that if I didn't go through with the arranged marriage to Kiba, Then Hanabi would be required to take my place and she would be branded with the caged bird seal so Kiba could control her. Naruto literally fell on his onto the ground in shock at hearing what Hinata had said before she continued on. If you remember Naruto-kun, Hanabi and Konohamaru had fallen in love with one another at that time and promised to marry when they reached legal age. I couldn't let my father and Kiba destroy their happiness. So I relented and agreed to the arranged marriage even though I knew that in saving Hanabi's happiness, I would be destroying my own. Why Hinata? Why didn't you tell me about this? I could have helped, we could have done something. Naruto asked in a hurt and angry voice. What could we have done, Naruto-kun? If Lady Tsunade couldn't help me, then there's nothing you could have done. I couldn't tell you the truth back then because my father and Kiba said if I did then they would follow through on the arranged marriage with Hanabi. They also said if you found out the truth they would make sure to hurt you. I would rather die than ever see you hurt, so I agreed to the marriage to save them. We could have run away together like I wanted. Naruto offered up in response. And leave behind my sister married to Kiba and branded, as well as Konohamaru heartbroken and alone. I know you love little Kono like a brother, so tell me Naruto-kun, could you have really done that to him? Naruto still felt and remembered the pain when he lost Hinata 3 years ago, and though he loathed to admit it, he wouldn't wish that kind of pain on an enemy, let alone someone he cared about. However, before he could contemplate further on everything, he heard Hinata comment. Hanabi and Konohamaru were married 2 weeks ago. It was a wonderful wedding and they both are very happy. They said only thing that kept the wedding from being perfect was that you weren't there to attend it, Naruto-kun. Naruto merely sat on the ground silent and unmoving with a stern yet reflective visage he bore upon his face. After a few minutes, Hinata could no longer take the silence and said, "Please Naruto-kun, say something to me. Please tell me you understand why I did what I had to do to save Hanabi and Konohamaru." Exhaling a mournful sigh, Naruto finally looked up and stated, "I understand Hinata, but you still should have trusted me and told me what Kiba and your father were doing 3 years ago. It wasn't a matter of trusting you, I would trust you with my life, Naruto-kun. It was a matter of I didn't want to see you hurt by my father or Kiba, don't you understand? I understand Hinata, but you don't understand. By not telling me what was going on and then watching you get married hurt worse than any physical pain your father or Kiba could have ever inflicted upon me. You were my angel, the one who saved me and showed me what real love was like after my foolish time with Sakura. Losing you nearly destroyed my heart, Hinata, and what was left of it, Ino finally killed a year later. I'm sorry, I know I hurt you terribly, but I thought I was doing the only thing I could to save the people I love from being hurt. I never stopped loving you, Naruto-kun. Even during my marriage my thoughts were unfaithful, because I only wanted you. If you no longer love me or even hate me because of what I did, I understand, but I will always love you, Naruto-kun, and that will never change." A pall of silence seemed to envelop Naruto and Hinata like a shroud. After a few minutes, Naruto finally exclaimed in frustration, "I don't know what you want me to say, Hinata. I don't hate you, I could never hate you, but I don't know if I still love you. I don't know what love is anymore. I once thought I did, but after Sakura, you, and Ino I came to realize I never knew. After that, I decided emotions like love only caused me great pain. So for the last 2 years I've made it a point to shut down foolish emotions like trust, happiness, and love. You say you still love me, but I'm not the same man I was 3 years ago. So how can you still love me? You're just clinging onto the fantasy of what I was, not what I am. And what I am now is someone who doubts he can ever love anyone again. You should just go back home, Hinata, and forget you ever found me. You're wrong, Naruto-kun. I know the man I've always loved is still inside of you, but I won't try and make you love me. I don't have a home to go back to anymore, but I won't stay if all I cause you is pain now." Hinata then wiped some tears out of her eyes before walking over to retrieve her mask, sword and supplies, as Naruto watched her with concern and doubt. It was then the Kyuubi no Yuko decided to speak his mind on the matter. So what are you going to do, kid? Just let her leave. Shut up, Fox, it's for the best. For the best, you say? Well, let me refresh your memory of what your former vixen has done. She's deserted her home, family, and husband just to find you. Which means she's now a fugitive who will have not only her two clans after her, but also hunter nins from your village trying to track her down. By her leaving because she doesn't want to hurt you, she will be all alone attempting to avoid all of those mortals trying to find her. Or better still, we're not that far from Kumogakure. Maybe they will capture the vixen and turn her into a breeding machine so they can gain her bloodline trait like they've always wanted. What should I do? Naruto thought with confusion, as the fox demon had given him pause to think about what he had said. The Kyuubi no Yuko thought his vessel's musings were amusing, but it soon turned boring and was growing quite irritating to the demon fox. So he took it upon himself to flash several images throughout Naruto's mind. One image was of Hinata being tried by the Konoha Council for treason. Another was an image of Hinata beaten and in chains and being dragged back before her father and Kiba. And finally an image of a Hinata strapped to a table in Kumogakure with a line of several Kumo shinobi moving towards her. This final image caused some red chakra to flare off of his body, startling everyone as he growled out in fury. Kyuubi. Oh, shut up and just take the vixen with you and be done with it. You aren't going to leave her alone with all of those dangers out there and you know it. Kyuubi grumbled in annoyance. Hinata, stop. It's too dangerous for you to be out here on your own alone. I'm making you no promises about what will happen between you and me, but if you want, you're welcome to accompany us. Naruto called out. Hinata's response was instantaneous, and before Naruto could blink, he was suddenly enveloped in a fierce hug. After a moment, Hinata realized what she had done and released him almost as quickly as she had grabbed him and stammered. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, I shouldn't have done that, but I would very much like to accompany you. It's alright, Hinata, but you do remember what I said about no promises. Naruto replied, a bit taken aback by Hinata's hug. Hi, I understand, but just so you know, I believe you still have the capacity to love and be loved. You just need to find it in yourself to let love back into your life. And if you will let me, I would like to be the one to help you find that love, Naruto-kun. So enthusiastic was her reply, that when he looked back down at her, for the first time in many a year, he smiled. And it made Hinata's heart skip a beat, as he hadn't smiled in over 2 years, and that one brief grin filled Hinata with hope that all was not lost with her, Naruto-kun. Yada. I have another wife-chan to play with. Nell exclaimed with excitement, as she clapped her hands gleefully before running up to Hinata and jumping into the Hyuga woman's arms for a hug. Whilst this took place, Yugito gave Naruto a sidelong look and asked in a bitter tone of voice. You sure this is a good idea? I don't know, but she's coming with us, end of discussion. Naruto hissed through his teeth, his blue eyes locking onto her brown. Whatever. Yugito derisively snorted, as she looked away, clearly not pleased at the addition of Hinata into their group. Ignoring Yugito's attitude for the moment, Naruto called Daisuke back over and asked. So, care to follow me on this little errand of mine, before you take me to see your boss? Daisuke rolled his massive shoulders in response, as he saw the look in the eyes of his potential comrade, the look of adventure. Sure. I could use a little fresh air, and it's better than listening to Sakari bitch about what you did to him. Looking to the now fully treated Sakari, Daisuke waved his large hand in farewell and laughed when he saw the angry look on Sakari's face before saying, Don't wait up. I'll see you back at base. Then he turned to follow Naruto and the others. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX master. Sasuke said to the servant who had opened the door to him. Be gone, Master Byakuya left strict orders not to be disturbed. Tell your master it is Sasuke Uchiha of the Uchiha clan from the Land of Fire. And I invoke the blood pact the Kuchiki clan and the Uchiha clan made years ago with one another to seek his audience. The servant shut the door and Sasuke patiently waited. A couple of minutes later, the servant returned and Sasuke was ushered into the castle and led to a great hall and told to wait. Moments later, a man with long onyx-colored hair and wearing intricate white headpieces called Kenseiken that symbolized his nobility as the head of the Kuchiki family, one on top of his head and another on the right side entered the room. Sasuke noted that the man bore an appearance and demeanor which reminded him of his older brother who addressed him in a stoic voice. So, Sasuke Uchiha of the Land of Fire, for what reason do you seek an audience with me? Thank you for seeing me, Lord Byakuya. The reason I've sought an audience with you is that I need a sword that can kill a demon and I've been told the Kuchiki clan can provide me with such a weapon. Indeed, a most unusual request. Come with me Sasuke Uchiha, we have much to discuss.